Walker. Man going the distance. Got it! The iron kind! Florida State leads. 1.8 remaining. Timeout. Kid from Nole, Massachusetts.
All right, everyone, welcome to the third edition of the Nole Hoops Authority podcast. Today, we are going to be taking some time to preview a pretty great week of basketball as Florida State goes up against Indiana and University of Florida. Ken Pomeroy has the teams ranked 18, 19, and 20 in the order of Florida, Indiana, and Florida State. So by the analytics, this seems to be an incredibly evenly matched week, all top 20 teams, and it should be very exciting. But before we get to a couple previews, want to just discuss really quick the takeaways that we had from that first game against UNF. Obviously, a very overmatched opponent, but I still think we were able to see some things out of that. Anthony, what stuck out to you?
Yeah, I mean, we could go a few different ways with that game and what to take away from it. Obviously, hard to get a firm grasp on what the lineups could like for this Hamilton team, seeing that he threw out not just hockey style lineups, but it almost seemed, I know I texted you during the game, like he was playing around joking. The game got a little tight at one point, kind of exactly like you predicted. And then we just went on an absolute tear to put it away and cover the spread. Thank you to all you gambling degenerates out there. We helped you hopefully win a couple bucks there following the game and following the spread. But I would say, first and foremost, senior leadership showed out, or at least elder classmen showed out. Gray looked awesome. I think that was one of the more effortless games he's had, and he kind of stacked the box there, was able to show off his passing, shot the ball well, dunked in the first game of the year. He only had 7 dunks through his first 2 seasons in Tallahassee, and it looked like he was trying to jump through the gym. Maybe he heard me and said like, hey, Anthony, I'm going to show you I can dunk. But other than that, big jump for Balsa. Koprivica looked great both on the offensive and defensive sides, passing the ball. I had a couple up and under scores as well when he was getting the ball underneath the hoop. As always, we looked long, we looked strong. Scotty Barnes is the biggest freshman I've ever seen in my life. One of our friends compared him to a Jack Magic Johnson. I think that's a discredit to Scotty because he looks way bigger than that. Awesome to see him there. And then one of the more quiet games we've ever seen from MJ Walker, but maybe his best game as a Seminole, 17 points, effortless. It seemed like, didn't even seem like he had to really break a sweat and was able to lead us in points there. And look true from the line as well. So overall, hard to take away a firm grasp of what this team could be, but I think our ceiling is very high. To put it nicely, we kind of beat the shit out of them.
Yeah, and I agree with all the things you said. Just to add to that, first of all, what encouraged me the most about MJ was he seemed to take a step back into kind of the role that we saw Trent take a lot of the time, and almost to a frustrating level at points where letting other guys take the lead and being there when he was needed. And I think that's, with this type of system, it's absolutely necessary that MJ plays that role where the guys know that he's there for them. And if they need a bucket, he'll get it. But until that moment comes, he's just going to play his role. And so I was really encouraged by that. One of the things that stuck out to me was just Sadar Calhoun. I mean, we've heard about this guy, how fast he was, how athletic he is, you comparing him to Tim Pickett, but just watching him play, as you texted me, it's like everybody else was in slow motion on the court. And that's including some incredible athletes that were on the court along with him. He's just got a different level of speed and quickness. And you could see that his shot is pure as it gets. And I think that's incredibly exciting. I want to see him get more minutes. The biggest concern was, how is this guy going to be able to defend? But he's so damn athletic that I don't think it's going to be that big of an issue because he's not going to face, other than against maybe teams like UF, you're just not going to face guys that have his level of athleticism. So I thought that was really encouraging. As you mentioned, Gray, that was the biggest surprise pleasantly to me, the way he was getting into passing lanes. I was super impressed by Wyatt Wilkes. Obviously, he shot terribly. He couldn't even hit the rim from three, but that didn't really concern me because I think we all know he's going to be able to shoot. But he was doing some things that we didn't see him do last year. He was getting in down low, getting rebounds, actually getting big because he's a 6'7", 6'8" guy. You know, he should be able to get big. And then he was also showing some vision, making passes and hitting some mid-range. And then most encouragingly in transition, you know, everybody's talking about the Scotty Barnes behind the back dunk, but that outlet pass from Wilkes to get it to him was extremely impressive, especially because he was pressured. So overall, I thought that all we saw was really positive things. You saw Osborne and Polite disappear a bit along with Evans, but that's completely fine. The only thing that was negative, and it's not really incredibly negative, but I think we can all agree that Nathaniel Jack and Quincy Ballard are not ready. I think this is to say that Nathaniel Jack probably will never be ready. And that Quincy, if this wasn't a unique year, would be redshirting because while I really liked seeing what we saw from him, you know, in terms of effort and getting down there, and I love getting him the minutes, the dude was backpedaling, making passes, you know, just like incredibly raw stuff. So give him 2 years and maybe he'll be something, but he's just not ready for the big time. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's only going to be a couple games on the schedule that I think he'll see as many minutes as he saw in game one. I don't think Jack is a player that's going to be much at this program at all. He came in as a prolific scorer and shooter, and he's shown a tendency to get the ball and jack it up. No pun intended, but it's not anywhere close. He can't play defense. Happy with what I saw from Ballard. Like the speed of the game isn't necessarily too fast. He's raw. The passing is not something he's comfortable with. Scoring, he had like a miracle basket where he kind of just like threw it back up at the rim and it like rolled in. But defensively, you know, he had a goaltending that he swatted back to Syracuse. So it's something that he'll adjust to. But if he could give us 3-4 minutes a game if he needs to, just like bang down low a little bit, I'm happy with that. This is a true freshman year for him, gonna get the full Stan Jones treatment, and it'll take some time. But outside of that, you know, impressed in that. And you brought up Dar, and it did look like everyone else was in slow motion when he was on the court. And like you said, he needs to get minutes. He's a firecracker. He's going to continue to light it up. It's just who's going to carry the team on any given night. I could see many nights where we kind of go to him for offense.
Yeah. I could see him becoming the guy that gets the final bucket even. You know, I really think he could be that type of guy. I don't think Scotty's ever going to be the final bucket type of guy because clearly he shot like 56% from the free throw line in high school. He went 0 for 3 in his first game. I don't think you can trust him to drive to the hoop and knock down the free throws. Dark could be that guy. Last thing I want to bring up before we move on to the previews, this podcast, resident favorite, Tanner Nagam. While I was actually impressed with how he did not look overmatched, obviously it is UNF, and it was probably similar to what he faced up in Toronto at Ryerson, where everyone was a foot and a half shorter than him. But he was battling down low, especially on the defensive boards, and really looking comfortable getting those boards and fighting. And then on the offensive end, his hands looked great. He was really receiving passes down low really well. So I think that's encouraging. But completely outside of his play, I just want to bring up that this guy, he's been on the team for like 3 weeks, and his bench presence is already elite.
Unmatched.
I don't remember if it was the Ballard basket or when Nathaniel Jack finally scored, but if you were watching the sideline, he picked up a metal chair over his head and started walking around with it like he was going in the stands and knocked someone out. Another point, they cut to him on the sideline, and he was dancing with his tongue out, like doing some weird dance. Just seems like a goofy dude, and I love seeing that guy on the bench, especially if he can get in there and play mean down low. You love seeing those types of guys, and that's what FSU thrives on, is that team aspect. So from one of our favorites, I was encouraged to see it seem like the team felt a similar way about
Yeah,
him.
yeah. He seems like a kind of a goofball, and every year we have one of those guys that's doing something silly on the bench or cheering on his teammates. And if, like you said, if he can contribute, that's a plus. I know we were all concerned with, how in shape he would be. If we're gonna run out lineups like we did this past game, then I don't necessarily think that his fitness is going to come into a major concern. There's not that many teams that are throwing 7-footers out there. So if he can get 10 minutes a game and do exactly what you said, we haven't even really seen his offensive game yet. But the fact that all he has to do is throw up his arms and they're already 2 feet taller than anyone else, even if they're jumping, is pretty cool. And something that we're going to see him develop throughout the season. I think we all knew that he was a little bit of a project coming in. As excited as we were, even if he's an NBA guy, he was going to be a project for an NBA team. He's our project now, and I'm excited to see how it all progresses.
For sure. All right, now let's get into the Wednesday game. Just today moved up from a 9:15 p.m. tip to a 7:15 p.m. tip. I'm excited because I will be there. I'll be up there in Tallahassee for both of the games this week, sitting behind the plastic barriers. It'll be very interesting to see what these games are like live. But this is a game that I think is definitely, as we've spoke to, a lot of people speak to, even within the program, is a sort of revenge game. The team does not like the way that it went last year. I think they know that it was one of their poorest performances, if not their poorest performance, and those older guys want to get revenge. Now, as we've also spoken about, this is a team that has one of the more dynamic players we're going to face in Trace Jackson Davis. This is a 6'9" big who can really come off screens and cut to the hoop and be a difference maker from a few different levels. But down low, he can body you, be physical, and really make a difference on the glass. When I think about this team overall, what I think is the key is actually not Trace Jackson Davis, because I think he's going to get his. I think it's actually Race Thompson. He is their other big. He's a 6'8" guy. He's a little bit more able to play on the wing than TJD is, but he is a guy that the Indiana faithful rave about all the work that he put in the offseason, how much he's developed. And, Indiana is right now without their normal center. I believe his name is Brunk, but he is out. And I actually think Indiana is better for it. I think that Race Thompson brings more athleticism and that they've seen that be a huge success both on offense and defense for them. Now that's their front court, but let's talk about their back court. First of all, they're a team that is not going to shoot very well. And they do have one pure shooter in Al Durham, but he got hurt in the Maui Asheville Classic, and he is questionable to be playing on Wednesday. He is really their only lighted up pure scorer. And beyond that, they've got Finney, and they've got some star freshmen who I'll get to in a second here, but they really don't have a guy who can maybe play that role that we saw from Green last year when a guy puts up 30 points from just shooting lights out from behind the line. And so I think without Durham, you take that element out of their game. And then beyond that, because Durham has been injured, they've been playing their freshmen quite a bit. Now, their freshmen are very talented. They've got Landers, who is a 5-star prospect, was a major get for Miller out there and for the Indiana program. But he's actually not the one who had the most successful high school career. It's actually Leal, who was the Indiana State Player of the Year. And so, they've got these two dynamic freshmen, and of them, Landers is certainly the more dynamic one and the one who's going to get more playing time. But these guys have really struggled in the early part of the season. And so that's mainly come from shooting and defense. Neither one has been hitting their threes, and neither one of them has been able to pick up the defensive scheme. And so I think that is something that FSU needs to prey on. If we've looked at who Indiana's played, they have a big advantage that they've played Providence, they've played Texas, and they played Stanford. Against Texas, they got absolutely lit up. And against Providence and Stanford, they lit those teams up. And I think what we see the difference is that length and athleticism of Texas. It's not to say that Stanford doesn't have athleticism and doesn't have length, but it's more so in these guards that is mid 6'6" type height in a Zaire Williams, who's just going to be a different level. Obviously, he's a top 10 pick. But Texas is running out guys that like Greg Brown, who are hitting that 7-foot height. They remind me of Florida State, and that athleticism and that length gave Indiana all kinds of trouble. They had no idea what to do with it. And I think that Florida State, if that was a scary team for them, Florida State's basically the Monstars, because it's just like you're going to throw out an insane amount of length and an insane amount of athleticism, and not even like length, but just pure size. The fact that your point guard could guard Trace Jackson Davis if we wanted him to, that Gray can guard Trace Jackson Davis at any point in the game, most likely 4 of the guys on the court are going to be able to guard their biggest dude. And so that's a big matchup. And I know you're going to get to that in a second here when we go through the positionals. But the last thing I want to bring up is, if I'm Hamilton, I think I almost play this back to something I saw him do last year. And I was up at the Louisville game in the KFC Yum Center, and Jordan Nora was just dominating us. And I looked up halfway through the first half, and I think he had almost 20 points at that point, and he was just crushing us. But we were up by like 7 or 8 points. And it became very clear that they had game planned to just let Nora go all out and get whatever he wanted, and they were going to shut down the rest of the team. And I almost feel like if you run that scheme against Trace Jackson Davis, let him get whatever he can when they get him the ball, but just make it a living hell for these freshmen in their backcourt. You're going to cause a lot of mistakes. And these kids, even though they've had 3 good games under their belt and 1 bad game, they're going to struggle against the size and athleticism of Florida State. So I think that's an interesting thing to consider. But either way, I feel pretty good about the matchup in this one. Why don't you talk to us about the positionals?
Yeah, and kind of, what you were saying there is what I agree with. We look at the competition that they faced thus far. Tennessee Tech. Am I scared of Tennessee Tech? No. Do I think we go and beat Providence? Yes. Do I think we go and beat Stanford? Yes. They are all double-digit wins for Indiana. Double-digit loss to Texas. Now, if you go back to episode 1, what did I say would happen in this game? I said it would be a double-digit win for Florida State. Do I think we're as talented as Texas? Yes. Do I think if you put us up against Texas right now, would we give them a shot and probably take a dub there? I also think that too. I think our experience at the guard position, and if we want to start there, the guard position is what's going to, I think, win us this game this week. I don't know where you put Scotty in this game. I think you could put him on Jackson Davis, and he could kind of shut him down. But I think your game plan, where we say, hey, Trace, take what you want. Take what you want, because you're not going to score 80 against us. You alone, you're not going to score 80, is I think exactly what we will do, and we're going to dominate their freshman guards. I think if you throw Polite out there, I think if you throw Barnes out there, I think if you throw MJ out there, and you're going to throw Evans out there too, they're not going to score on our guards. We saw that. Our guards are hounding on defense right now. They're not allowing passes. They're not allowing you to get to the basket. I mean, what I will say is what Scotty is doing exceptionally well right now is clogging passing lanes with his length, because he can take those chances, right? He can take the chance on extending his arm out and creating a turnover from the pass, and have the ability to be quick enough and long enough to cut off a lane where someone's going to slash. So if I have to give an advantage there, I'm going to give the advantage to Florida State. I think we dominate from the guard standpoint. And if you look more towards the forwards and bigs, obviously they have their 2 primetime players. You have Thompson and you have Jackson Davis. They're going to get theirs. I think you're right. 100% they're going to get theirs. But we also now have the bodies that we didn't have last year, nor do I see them shooting the way they did last year. It was lights out. I don't think they missed. I would love to see the actual percentage. I probably should have that up anyway in front of me. The actual percentage of threes that they shot last year, unreal. No one missed. They were taking shots from half court. I don't see that happening again. I don't see that, especially this time in Tallahassee. Different ball.
And if Durham's out.
Yes, which is massive. So, who do I give the advantage to at the forwards, centers? I'll put the blinders back on. Yeah, I'm going to give it to Florida State. Look at what we did in game 1, albeit inferior competition. We gave a team fits with our length, and I think we're going to give them fits with our length here. If they're going to shoot threes, they're not going to be rebounding over players from Tennessee Tech. We have 2 7-footers that could play on the floor at the same time if he wanted to, and have Tanner go play the stretch 4 and shoot because he can, and have Boss underneath. Or you could put Gray and Malik out there at the same time and still have that exact same length with the bodies down low. So you have options here. Again, I said it before. I'm just going to say it again. This is going to be a double-digit win for Florida State.
All right. We'll get to the exact predictions in a second here, but it is pretty interesting just to think about that you could have Scotty Barnes going down the court up against his 5-star counterpart, on offense, and this guy's 6'2" and has to deal with Scotty, going to the hoop, trying to crash the boards. But then we could run back and Scotty could switch right on to TJD or Race Thompson. And he's bigger than both of those dudes. I mean, he's not quite the weight of TJD, but if you're looking at pure bulk, he is
just as big. Just as big.
So that's going to be, I think, really interesting to watch. And I think this is really great for Florida State to face this type of team early on.
I also think that we won't see a whistle fest. We rarely do in Tallahassee.
Yeah.
And I think that gives us the ability to throw our depth at a team like this and say, go ahead. Like, you're not going to get the fouls called that you would normally get. And that's not saying anything to the refs in Tallahassee. I just know when we go on the road, sometimes there's a tendency to find some whistles when we play physical in the paint. And I don't think that we're going to see that this time around.
Especially when Indiana fans are throwing things onto the court when they've been getting every single call the entire game. It's pretty interesting stuff. But yes, I agree with you. They will need that type of game to have a win here, in my opinion, and we'll get to that in a second. But let's move on to the game on Saturday, 11 a.m. Against the University of Florida. This is a game that is likely scheduled in that time slot because people still care about football. That being said, I don't think the game time matters as much as the team that we're facing. Florida State has beaten Florida 6 years in a row, going for 7. Mike White truly has no answer. I think he is probably scared by the sight of Leonard Hamilton at this point. That being said, this is an incredibly talented team. We've mentioned it before, but addition by subtraction, Andrew Nembhard looks great at Gonzaga. He was a terrible fit for Mike White's system that wants to move fast at UF, as was Kerry Blackshear. The team they've got now looks like it fits Mike White's system. And it's pretty scary when they're shooting well to see how good this team can possibly be. You've obviously got Keontae Johnson, who was their best player last year. He's their best player this year. He can do quite literally everything on the court. Beyond that, they've got Trey Mann, kid who was about 6'1" last year, has shot all the way up to being 6'6" now. He is a guy that Leonard Hamilton went after extremely hard, and we lost that battle. He's a Gainesville kid, came to UF. He can do everything that he did at 6'1", but now he's 5 inches taller, and he's looking like a first-round draft pick. They also got a transfer in Appleby from Cleveland State that is an incredibly efficient scorer, a great ad who fits that system very well and is going to be a great distributor for them. I haven't even gotten to Scotty Lewis, who's probably their best NBA prospect on the team. He was a top 10 recruit in the nation, all the athleticism in the world, a similar guy to what we talk about with Sardar Calhoun in that he just does things that you cannot believe on the court. He's 4th down the list, if not 5th, because they also have Omar Payne and Noah Locke. This is a team that is deep. They've brought in several freshmen. They are athletic. The more I watch them play, the more I think that this might be, by the end of the year, the best team that Florida State has faced. I'm very high on Virginia, but the way they've looked recently, I don't know how to feel about that. I think Florida is a better team than Duke, and we'll see what happens with UNC. I think getting them early on and the history that we have in this rivalry is going to help us. But this is a very, very scary game because they can do everything that we can do. Now, They struggled with Army, almost lost that game, were trailing most of the game, but they also shot 25% from three. In their other two games this year, notably against BC, they shot above 40% from three and beat them by 20, and it probably could have been 40 or 50 if they wanted it to. They just looked like a different level of athlete than what BC did. And so I think this is going to be an incredibly interesting matchup because in every aspect besides size, Florida can match Florida State. And I would say they probably have a little bit more in the way of skill on the offensive end than what Florida State has. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts on how we match up individually, because this is going to be a really interesting game.
Unfortunately, in this circumstance, I do kind of agree with everything you've said there. I think from an athleticism and talent standpoint, this is probably the team that matches up with us. I guess the best, as you would call it, or the worst in our kind of circumstance here. They have the size, they have the depth, they have the star potential, and they have the players that are already playing like stars. They have a transfer, like you said, in Appleby that fits their system. We've gotten transfers that fit our system really well, like Malik, guys like Evans that fit our system really well. But now Mike Waite is kind of putting it together. This is a team that moves fast. Let's start with the guards. I would say, high level overview. This is a team that I would almost call it even. NBA potential, yes. Talent, yes. Florida probably takes that over us. Experience and actually playing to the potential that you have, I would give to Florida State. So do you want to call that a wash? I guess we could call that a wash, but I do think in this game, this is a game that I think we need MJ to kind of take over if we're going to win. A guy that's been through this game before, seen us win multiple times prior, but also have the leadership capabilities and leadership qualities, and already having expressed those and used those in years past, he's going to have to carry us here. As far as the bigs go, I like our size, but I think they're a little bit quicker than we are. I think it really depends where we throw kind of our matchups. Again, like, who are you going to throw Polite on? Do you throw Polite on Appleby? Do you try to throw Polite on a guy like Scotty Lewis, who is similar size, but probably a little bit more athletic than what Polite is, who I shouldn't say is robotic, but a little tight at times? Doesn't need to score. So we don't need Polite to score in a game like this. So maybe just say, hey, go play defense today and we'll pick you up on another day. We'll let you light it up from the corner three. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we play big this game because I don't think they're going to go big. I think they're going to go fast. So I don't know if Balsa and Tanner are going to have monster games here, both on either side of the floor. I think Malik's going to get his money worth in this game. Malik's going to be the guy running up and down the court because he's the guy athletic enough and fast enough to run up down the court with them. I'm going to give Florida the advantage on players, but I give us the advantage on coaching, which Ham has shown year in and year out. Like, what did Pedro say a couple years back? Like, call the Yankees my daddy. Like, Mike White calls Ham his daddy. We've seen it year in and year out, the exact same thing. They're supposed to be more talented than us. We play them early in the year when they're supposed to be more cohesive as a unit, and then we go and dominate. The only year we didn't dominate, they beat themselves by tipping a ball in. So thanks for the gift. Since then, we've gone and wiped the floor with Florida. So I just think this year's going to be a little bit different. It's a team that fits White's style, and it's a team that's playing well. I would have said after the Army game, and I think after, you even texted me after the Army game, this is not a good Florida team, and then they come back and beat the crap out of two teams. So I'm going to stick with my original prediction. I have Florida winning here.
All right. Well, then let's get into predictions a little bit. Let's start with Indiana, and I'll start with my prediction here. I was listening to an Indiana basketball podcast called Assembly Call, really great podcast that they have for their team. And they've spoken to how great the team has looked on defense this year and how sustainable they think that actually is, that they think this is going to be a top 15 defensive team, regardless of what happens on offense. So I've kind of changed my prediction a little bit from seeing how they've played against length and seeing how much those freshman guards have struggled. I do think that this is going to be a fairly dominant win for Florida State, but I think it's going to be very low scoring. And so I'm going to go with a 62 to 54 win for Florida State. I'm not going to quite go double digits. I think it's going to be around that range most of the game. I think obviously Indiana will threaten at points, but I think that it's a fairly smooth and consistent win for the Seminoles. I think this is where we really see maybe Scotty take a step earlier on than we maybe thought he might, and really do some things that impress us. I think that we see the role playing and just the way we can rotate our bench really shine through, because Indiana ain't playing more than 8 or 9 guys, especially if they've got those 2 injuries. So I think that the depth here is going to be tough on them, and I'm very excited to see what the outcome will be. What are you going for a score prediction?
Yeah, so I have to obviously stick to my double-digit prediction here, as I've doubled down on that more than once. So this isn't going to be the laser show that we saw last year, where it was Steph Curry in 5 different Indiana jerseys. No, I'm going to go with 71 to 55. I think this is a dominant win. And to your point, if we see second half Scotty, where he's driving to the basket, getting offensive rebounds, and not worried about shooting, this could be a triple-double night for him.
I sure hope it is. Okay, now let's talk Gators. When we went through our preseason predictions, I had Florida State winning this game and then losing the next game to Georgia Tech. Now, my Georgia Tech prediction looked pretty damn silly when they lost to Georgia State and then subsequently Mercer. But then they went out and beat Kentucky last night, although Kentucky is arguably one of the worst teams in the country at this current moment in time. Who knows? Florida State still could lose to Georgia Tech, but I don't quite see it happening anymore. And the more I've watched this Florida team, the more it scares me. I don't think that there's anything to say that Mike White has become a better coach. I still think that he is a really, really underachieving and poor decision-making coach. And so I think it's going to take a lot to overcome that. And I think that a lot of these UF guys are going to have the jitters facing a Florida State team that has owned them and just dominated. And so I think that if Florida State comes out like we have the past 3 years in a row and from the get-go starts dominating the Gators, this is over. They're not coming back. If you get up by double digits, I think it's over. But I unfortunately don't think that's going to happen. I think that this is the game that's going to break the streak in Tallahassee. I think I'm going to join with you here. I'm going to go with a score that is close. I'm going to go 76 to 70 Gators. I think it's closer than 6 points, but I think they pull away at the end. I just think that this is tough early on for us to face these types of athletes before Scotty has gotten a chance, as well as Sadar and some of these other guys to really become accustomed. And I think the difference between Indiana and Florida and the way that you have to scheme for those 2 teams is really going to give those guys some trouble. And so I'll go that this is our first loss of the season.
Yeah, I'd love to disagree with you here, but I tend to agree. The only way that I see us taking this one is like you said, if we throw the first haymaker and it's early, we get out to a double-digit lead in the first half early. This is a team that could crumble. We've seen it before. The few other times in recent memory, when we get out there and we score early, we kind of dominate start to finish. This could also be, optimistic. The optimist in me says, like, this is the Dar coming out party where we're kind of struggling on offense, and Ham goes like, all right, kid, do whatever the fuck you want, start shooting. And he could. But realistically speaking, I do see this as a close game too. I'm going to go with 67-61 Florida Gators.
Yeah. And I do want to note that last year, when I went to the game here in Gainesville, I would have bet you any amount of money on the face of the earth that Florida State was not only going to lose to Florida, but lose by double digits. And we ended up just flat out dominating them. So if we do end up winning again for the 7th time, I'm going to start to feel like I can never predict Florida State to win this game, because every time I predict the Gators to win, we end up crushing them. However, this year, I truly do believe it's going to be close. I just think it's going to be a tough one to overcome. So that's what we've got for this week. Really exciting stuff coming up. Hopefully, let's cross our fingers, knock on wood, that there is no COVID issues. We've seen some incredible games already get canceled because of COVID. Let's pray that Florida State does not fall into that, and that Indiana and UF can travel here safely with no issues, and we get both of these games off this week. And let's pray that they're both wins, and that this team is looking like a title contender earlier on than we thought they were. With that, we really appreciate you listening, and go Noles.
Go Noles.